Some people would probably be surprised to find out that the guitar I use to record the metal lead guitar method is actually this one. It's an old St. Blues, and I'll tell you the story of the guitar and the recording in this video. The original version of the method was called Heavy Metal Lead Guitar, and the cover had this crazy star-shaped guitar, very showy thing. But the guitar that I actually used to record was this one right here. Just love the way this thing sounds and plays. It was given to me by a friend, which is an awesome way to get a guitar, and it was free, so you can't beat that. I always loved this maple neck on the thing, and it was a kind of a glossy finish, so it was very smooth and it was easy to bend on. The slow bends, there's a lot of that in metal lead guitar, and this guitar really suited that. A couple of years later, I ended up scalloping the fretboard myself. I just took a file, a wood file, and went at it, and if you can see this, I suppose it's a gutsy thing to do, or maybe kind of stupid, to just grab a file and go at a guitar, especially one that you really like. But I had heard a lot about, Yngwie at the time, was playing on scalloped necks, and I thought, well, let's try it and see what happens. The worst thing that could happen is I have to, take the neck, it's a bolt-on neck, take it off and put a new neck on. Well, it was a chance I was willing to take. After that was done, of course, it's even easier to bend. People wonder about playing on a scalloped neck, what does it feel like? I never really noticed much of a difference because, if you have a fairly light touch as you play, then it's not going to matter much whether there's any wood behind it or not, because you're not really pressing that much. If you have bad technique and you press too hard, well, you're going to be sending the string sharp, but that's really not a problem if you have a fairly well-developed technique. The beauty of the scalloped neck, though, is that it makes vibrato a lot easier, it makes string bending easier. St. Blues was a company that I don't think was around all that long, but they did make some really good instruments. It's kind of an amalgam of a lot of things, really, as far as the look or the shape of it. You've got the Tele headstock design, and then you've got like a Strat pick guard here with the three pickups. Now, of course, it's got a humbucker in there as a nod toward the metal stuff, which of course I wanted, and I swapped that out with a Duncan custom pickup that I used there. And the shape, of course, is the shape of the Les Paul, but it's a light body. It's fairly thin. It's not a very thick body. It's also got the Strat style vibrato bar, so on the back side you've got your springs. I don't know what kind of wood is in the body, but of course it's a maple neck. Now, maple is a light wood, and so it's a brighter sound, and basically it's a fairly bright guitar. In fact, if you play it without an amp on, it sounds kind of plinky, and you might think, well, that's not really good for metal, but actually I found that it's a great tone for playing metal. You see, if you have a guitar that has a lot of dense, heavy wood that has a bassy tone, I don't actually think that's really good to front end the amp with too much low end. That kind of robs some of the punch. I want the low end to be there, but what I find is that if I front end the amp with a tone that's got more mid-range, it's more plinky and it has more punch, I get a lot more clarity and articulation and attack in the sound. And then I'll add low end, coming out like to the mic'd sound, and that gives me a punchy low end as opposed to a kind of a thick, muddy low end. The tone of this guitar just really works for me. I mean, it's got this nice, tight low end, so with palm muting, I can really feel, the low end of it, and yet it's got this crushing attack, like the pick attacks are nice and solid. false harmonics just seem to be a little easier to get on this guitar, and they sustain well. So not quite sure why exactly that is, but hey, you can't argue with success, right? These days, I actually don't play this guitar a lot, but I do bring it out sometimes and will record with it if I want to do something that is, very bend intensive, vibrato intensive. And that just happened actually this last week. I was writing a piece for the upcoming Speed Mechanics 2 book, and it was a kind of a modern, high energy, a heavy blues rock based or maybe Hendrix kind of White Stripes inspired thing. And I decided, that would be a good one for this guitar. So I pulled it out, and I'll play a bit of it here for you. The story actually starts, I think, in about the end of 1983 or maybe early 1984, because that's when I wrote the song Babylon. That is the instrumental piece that happens at the end of the method. Well, that song was not written for the method. It was written years before. And I was in a band and just writing stuff, and I thought, hey, there's a cool idea for this kind of epic instrumental piece that goes through a lot of changes. So, I wrote the song and we demoed it and recorded it onto a little 4-track cassette recorder, kind of a rough idea of what it would sound like. After that, I actually had the opportunity to write the books for Hal Leonard. So the day came to do the recording. And because Hal Leonard's headquarters are located in Milwaukee, I drove up to a studio there in Milwaukee. And that's where we did the recording. We did it with a bass player and a drummer who were studio musicians I'd never played with before. But we got together and we rehearsed in the studio for a couple of hours, ran through the stuff, and then recorded it. And as I remember, I think I did all the solos for metal lead guitar in one day. I had recorded all of the rhythm tracks in one day, with the bands, and then I came back the next day and did all the leads. But there was a little bit of a problem that happened. After the session, I drove back home. I was living in Indiana at the time. And when I got home, I listened to the recording, and that thing happens. When you're in the studio, everything sounds great, of course. You're in a great environment with a great system and great speakers, and it sounds awesome. And of course, you mix to the room, so you think it sounds really good. You take the thing out, you listen to it on your home stereo, and it sounds like crap. That sort of happened. So it wasn't too far off, but it just didn't have the drive and the energy, especially the song, that song Babylon. It didn't quite reach the level that I wanted. The rest of the solos worked out pretty good, but that was a weak spot. And I thought, you know what? You just can't have a weak spot at the end of the method. That's the cornerstone of the whole thing. That's the challenge piece, what we're rising to, right? So it's got to be inspiring, or we don't have it. And so I called, the people at Hal Leonard to say, hey, this just isn't good enough. We've got to come back and we've got to remix this thing or retrack some of the guitar work or whatever. And of course, that's money, and they're totally opposed to it. What are you talking about? It sounds great to us. So, that's kind of that old problem that happens. The artist has a very specific vision and you want to get what you want. And the people that are, the business people, they don't really understand that aspect of it as much. And they're watching the money. So anyway, long story short, I scheduled another session, and I came up at my own expense and just paid to have a better version of it done, which we accomplished, and then we ended up using that one in the final version. Be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. I'll see you in the next video.